Onyi.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I work with an organization, an intergovernmental organization, which is based in Delhi, India. It's it's like a collaborative platform of about 120 signatory countries. I would say it's one of the newest international organizations because it was just launched in 2015 at COP. So basically, we're looking at tackling environment, sustainability, and climate change through looking at it from the energy angle. When you look at most of the, if we look at how we view the greenhouse emissions, we all know what causes greenhouse emissions, and the carbon CO2, and we are looking at if this is looked at from if we can all change fundamentally how we generate and distribute energy, this can have a huge impact on helping to curb emissions in the long run. On an average, each country is looked at as having about 40% of its carbon emissions come from power generating plants. And if that can be replaced with cleaner, new clean energy, then there is a huge curbing of emissions in that angle. So the International Solar Alliance works with its member countries to help the energy transition to greener energy, which is solar, which has been seen as one of the world's cleaner sources of energy for now, and it's becoming quite cost effective also in the long run. But we're not just looking at it from the energy emissions angle, we're also looking at ensuring that there is universal access to energy, and it's not just general access, it's clean and affordable clean energy access. So part of what I do for the organization is to support a lot of the least developed countries and most of the developing economies to ensure that they have the right legal and regulatory framework that can attract investments in clean energy sector in their countries. So when countries are trying to open up and work more towards expanding energy access, especially for small island states and these least developed countries, the fossil generating energy with fossil fuel at some point is still a bit cheaper than cleaner energy, but at the longer run, we have environmental issues to deal with. So this organization, we work to ensure that the country just does not expand its fossil fuel base to helping create universal access to energy for all its citizens, but also ensure that we have the right enabling framework that can have private investors come in and set up these clean energy plans. Part of this will also include looking at working with the regulators closely to ensure that there are those enabling environments that have been put together. There is the economic policies that we have to really review and help them set up some of these things. And then there are the parts that has to do with capacity building for a lot of regulators in these countries to ensure that in making the right decisions, whether they're talking about power purchase agreements or they're trying to deal with, solar power plants, that they have the right capacity to go into those business decisions and negotiate effectively what their work will be. And then for a lot of the other countries as well, it boils down to providing technical assistance for them to have the very basic frameworks, which can be both their regulations that has to do with the sort of solar that they can have or how the consumers will have to interact with using solar as supplementary energy. Sometimes we have to help redraft their energy principle laws just to ensure that these are some of the right ways that they can integrate clean energy mix in their countries in this dual fold. So part of this has been also my experience from the Harvard Law School, even while I wasn't specifically under the environmental clinic, which I tried to get in, but at some point, because of my credit load, I couldn't. But I had been quite very interested in law and economic development. Took a couple of courses on that with David Kennedy, and there are some other courses. So that has helped me in discussing and navigating this legal and business landscapes and having to deal with the policy decision making for a lot of the governments when we're having to navigate between cost effectiveness of a particular source of energy and having to go with the existing status quo. So there's having a very multidisciplinary background from the Harvard Law School kind of equipped me for the current role, which was quite out of serendipity. I wasn't looking to get into energy law, but working for this organization, I found myself having to lead this regulatory initiative because I was there. And that, drawing back from my background from the Harvard Law School, it has been amazing to work with so many African countries and so many Pacific Island developing states in creating what will be enabling for clean energy investments in their various countries. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Mergen, and thank you to my co-panelists. It's fascinating to hear your stories, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's absolutely delightful to be back here at Harvard. It meant the world to me. I work as a private attorney in a commercial law firm in Oslo called Simonsen Vogt Wiig, where I have the great luck of representing several environmental organizations in lawsuits. Before I went into private practice, I worked for the National Human Rights Institution in Norway, where I had the honor of representing 46 national human rights institutions in Europe in support of some very courageous Swiss elderly women called the Klimaseniorinnen in a landmark win against Switzerland in the European Court of Human Rights. I pleaded in the court's grand chamber with the support of another Harvard alumna, Katalin Siljok, who works for the Ombudsman for Future Generations in Hungary. And we were able to reach out to each other because we both knew that we had gone to Harvard and had heard about each other. So that was instrumental just in that little sense. And the court followed our advice, deriving a right to protection against climate harm from the right to privacy and acknowledging that the right to life is applicable to climate harm. And since last year, I represent Greenpeace Nordic and Young Friends of the Earth Norway in an injunction case against the Norwegian state to suspend and quash 3 new oil permits in the North Sea. And we won on all counts in the district court in January, and we're now defending that win on appeal. In June, the UK Supreme Court, who we heard from, Justice Lady Arden, the UK Supreme Court followed the Oslo District Court, citing our win as persuasive authority in the interpretation of a central EU directive on environmental impact assessments. And the UK government, not yet their Norwegian counterparts, but the UK government now concedes that there's an error in law and has thrown its hands in several similar lawsuits, including a coal mine that will ensure that several 100 million tons of CO2 is going to stay below ground if it's not permitted. And relatedly, I represent the same organizations in a high-profile case before the European Court of Human Rights on Arctic drilling. We have submitted scientific evidence that the 6.6 gigatons of CO2, only CO2, that is embedded in the Arctic, which is now opened for drilling, would cause millions of deaths only from heat and could in itself trigger tipping points. And that it would melt away the highly snow-dependent Sami indigenous cultural practices that Norway has a particular responsibility to protect. And we say that the decision to open the Arctic for drilling violate the right to life and physical integrity, and at any rate, that the disregard for those disparate impacts amounts to indirect discrimination against their interests. And finally, I represent the World Wildlife Foundation in a new challenge against an equally reckless decision to open an area the size of the UK for deep sea mining on the Norwegian continental shelf. And since no one has knowledge about 99% of the area, we have no idea what species that are down there. We just recently learned that oxygen is produced in the depths of sea. We say that the environmental impact assessment is flawed. So that's a case we're fighting now in November. And I'd love to come to the impact of Harvard, but I'll say it was truly transformational for what I've done. Thank you so much. We're going to give folks lots of time for questions, but I want to start with some of you have had a chance to reflect on your time at Harvard and how that has made a difference in the work that you do now. I'm really interested in sort of what advice you have, and I'm just blown away by this panel. Is amazing. So thank you so much for making the time to come and speak to us today. But I'm really interested in sort of like what advice you might have for the folks in the audience and our students, right, that we're working with today, the JD and LLM students, about getting into this work, how to think about this work, things that you gained an appreciation for during your time from Harvard, and maybe things that, as the world changes, we confront this climate catastrophe, biodiversity catastrophe, all of these things that are happening that you think we ought to be doing. Does that sound fair? And I'll do it the opposite direction, Jenny. I'll start with you. Well, thank you. No, advice is always very difficult to give. It's best to give oneself advice in hindsight. But I say, I think if I can go a little personal, I think that's the most genius answer you can get. I came here to Harvard as an ambitious government attorney. I was preoccupied by the legitimacy of international courts. I was concerned about certain expansionist radical interpretations of some courts on the detriment of Norwegian government interests. But I also came here as a young mom with the child. The Harvard generously just deferred my admission for a year. And she took her first steps on these grounds. And with her, a growing anxiety that we were not leaving her and her playmates a better world. So during commencement, I tore up my course plans and I decided to enroll in Jodie Freeman's course on climate and law and policy. And that's the best decision I've made. And I also soaked up all courses across Cambridge, across campus, on environment and climate, far beyond law. And there's one afternoon that's set in stone for me. It's a class I took with Professor Daniel Schrag in geology. He was visiting Freeman's class. And he just set out the brutal physics of climate science. And it opened my eyes. I knew, but I didn't know how bad. And I remember walking in the rain back home that afternoon and promising myself that I would do everything in my power to do something about that. And I confided in Professor David Kennedy at one point that I also had, who was phenomenal. And he said that what you describe is a turn from process to substance. And that's Harvard Law School to me. It's deep knowledge that you can expose yourself to, but it's also the agency to use it. And it's the confidence that you have acquired cutting-edge knowledge and that you can bring that back to wherever you come from. I come from the 7th largest exporter of oil, and that's, you can put that knowledge to use. And that is, it's a massive privilege to be here as a student. Pure luck and skill, but a lot of luck to come in. It's a massive privilege. And with that comes the duty to use that knowledge to the best of the societies that you come from. Because it's limitless what you can achieve if you only pursue your own ends. But with that privilege comes the duty to use it to the best of others. So my advice to wrap that up is expose yourself to new knowledge and do all the reading. It's gonna be hyper tough. And find your own voice. My supervisor, Vicky Jackson, she said, "Why do you cite all these judges? What do you mean?" Learn about that and make friends. You're gonna have a patchwork of phenomenal lawyers out there who's gonna help you and who's gonna achieve amazing things. And I guess my last advice for those of you, if any, with kids, it's gonna be a lot harder, I think, but it's doable. And it's good to take breaks from readings and to do something that's fun and to have a routine that sort of splits it up, especially if you work in this field, because it's exhausting, because it's just pure uphill. So take care of yourself.
So it's gonna be difficult to top that, but I think that Jenny, had put it all into context, and I recall quite fondly the advice if an alumni, a former HLS LLM, had also given me when I was stressing out about my law school days. He told me, I think I had a paper to submit to David Kennedy and I couldn't figure out what I was doing. And he told me that Harvard Law School is a great place to be from and not at. So when you're at Harvard Law School, it takes a toll on you, but mentally, physically, academically, because the rigorous training, the analytical skills that you need to put in place, the readings, the clinics, the seminars, they are quite a lot. And of course, you have to give in your best. So yes, there's gonna be a lot of time that you just feel like you're not getting a breathing space, but just remember that this is the nurturing process. And I had a fantastic time at the Harvard Law School, being close to a lot of the professors. Always feel free to go ask your questions, even if it means you think it's the most stupid question on earth, but I have seen that there is the multidisciplinary approach in a lot of the courses as well. So you can be stressing out about something in international business law, and then you're able to navigate it from what you've gotten from law and economic development. So these are some of the ways that I've seen that I was able to make the most use of my time at the Harvard Law School. And most importantly, I would want to add that being here was transformative for me because it takes you out from just being your country person. Now you're probably from Greece, or you're from Brazil, or you're from Nigeria. But after this program, you're not just competing within your geography anymore. You're able to contribute on the global scale. You're able to effectively compete and contribute widely enough because of the sort of background that you're going to get from Harvard Law School. So that is the transformative effect of the LLM. It doesn't put you in one box. It gives you, the world becomes your oyster, and you're able to move across jurisdictions and help sort real life challenges and problems in these spaces. So I would also encourage you to network. This is a high value network of individuals, both from your professors to your fellow students to the alumni. Make sure to be in contact, touch base with everyone. And this has been transformative for me in also helping to shape my career as I go forward. And I believe that it will also help you all. Thank you.
So I would start with a very personal experience. First class, halfway through, I start feeling awful. Long story short, kidney stones. So I missed the whole full first week where you are going to be auditing classes. So I was stuck with the classes I had chosen. But what it meant for me is that I made somehow instant friends. The solidarity of people being away and helping you. It was an amazing experience. In fact, those are one of my few best friends internationally. I still have contact with them. And I got an advice from a friend who was here at the LLM and was dean at our law school. He said, social life is mandatory. And I'm like, how mandatory, and to what extent of social do you mean? And I think, reflecting on that, in hindsight, is the classroom and the formal legal education is very important. But the real life experience of learning from other people, from their point of view, that's how I learned international environmental law, and I had no idea. Because I was hearing from something in Syria, from Africa, from the Amazon, and those were the casual conversations we were having, and they were being kind of archived in my mind, and then it gives you a different perspective, because you go back and you are different in the sense of your mind has been opened, and there's no turning back, which means that now you have a responsibility. And that responsibility gives you, I wouldn't say entitlement, but it empowers you to speak up, to do something, to move beyond your small space and make difference. Small or big, it doesn't matter. It's different as long as it's in the right direction and for the right reasons. Because we do things or others do things without thinking about stuff. And there's a duty in knowing that, a responsibility and accountability in doing that. And so for me now, working with UNICEF and Pure Earth, first it was a program called Protecting Every Child's Potential, and now it's Healthy Environments for Healthy Children, which is addressing the aspects of climate change in children and the effect it has on them. It is about that responsibility and that accountability to make sure that you help change happen. And I think having the network that you create and you're exposed to, it's transformative. For me, that's a very powerful word of what it encompasses being here. Having access, we have a saying in Spanish, don't give me, just put me where there is. So you have access. And I think that is very good from a networking and experience perspective, but also it is a huge challenge and responsibility. And I think we have that to be grateful from the experience being in Harvard Law School and the LLM program.
I'll be shorter because it feels like it's a repetition. There's a little bit of each of what has been said that I could say again. I guess common thread would be agree to be disorientated even though there's orientation week, because it's only the beginning of the journey of awakening. And I think we can all share that. I personally choose classes that had no idea even existed in this world, in their content, their approach, their methodology. I was absolutely terrified of my first few classes. But so agree to be disorientated, agree to step out of your comfort zone, embrace it, because eventually you'll see, looking back, and we have the privilege of doing here today, there's a thread. If you've got out of your comfort zone, you open up your brains, and then it'll pay back somehow, some way. The privilege, I agree fully, and the duty to be agents of change. And of course, as you've heard me, I do this with a sense of urgency. I'm like Jenny. We pick up on the same piece of the science, the Arctic, the tipping points, as you know. I'm just terrified of the near term and how we're going to dent and how we're going to make a difference. Now, again, agree with Anna Margarita, sorry, the opportunity to have a worldwide network. One of my colleagues from Turkey is here, Gonench. We lose ourselves, find ourselves again 20 years later, and I feel a little bit old, though I'm a little bit jealous. And Margarita, you with me, but those two, they're a little bit annoying. And mostly because they had the opportunity to have environmental classes when I walked in 2001.
Internet.
And
A more developed internet.
but we didn't have, that wasn't on offer. So I think I quite like, can we do a second one? Do we get a refund on the second LLM? I'm so jealous. I quite like it. I'm pondering. Don't know whether that fits with my my sense of urgency. But I'm very happy to be here, and maybe you can be vicariously doing my second LLM, which I would love to have the opportunity to do. Use your network, yes. My boss always says there's a fine line between networking and not working. So you just have to just put in the hours and do your networking. But yeah, no, very happy to be here. Very privileged to talk with all of you and expand our network. Thank you.
I'm going to pick up on a phrase that Anna used, which I loved. I've heard a number of phrases that I'm going to put into my vocabulary, but I'm going to embrace the bear here and move on to a somewhat more serious subject, which is, as the panel was recounting the incredibly important work that they do, I heard discussion of pediatric health. I heard discussion of energy equity, the climate crisis, tipping points, our duties to indigenous people, and the threats that they face in the climate crisis. These are really serious things. They're things that we all think about a lot in the Harvard Environmental Law program. And I would love for the panel to just sort of, going back to the work that you do and your experiences, and also, being a parent in this space, obviously, very significant. Talk a little bit about something in your day-to-day work that makes you hopeful. And I'll open it up to whoever might want to start on that.
Let me start with an example. In all this awareness of children's health, in the country of Georgia, there's like 50% of the children in the country had lead in blood. And the source is spices. They add lead in order to brighten the color of turmeric. So beware of turmeric. And in 2 years, because there was this coalition between government willingness and the NGOs and the funding that allowed it to change in less than 2 years. And for me, that meant that there's hope. And the duty is of how to make those actors work. Because we know all the differences that we have. What about discussing where we meet our minds? And I think is the how to get to yes. In fact, there was a professor about that book, and we took courses on that and lectures. And the getting to yes, it's a much more difficult road. But every time there's a new national health survey in Mexico that is integrating as mandatory to do lead checks on pregnant women and children under 5 years of age, it's a good day. Because you are detecting that, and then, of course, the treatment and this and that and whatever, but it's opening and making people aware of things. And I think bringing all those discussions forward and being able to have progress moving forward, I think for me, it's amazing. And we recycled around 30 million batteries a year or 8,000 batteries per hour in the world. And knowing that all those batteries are not in a dumpster or in a river or leaking or leaching into the underground water, or that they're being recycled inadequately and the fumes go to organic crops. For me, it's something that I cannot stop doing in terms of the importance of circular economy and doing things right. And it's the not working piece of the networking, and that you need to be able to get more people on this side than the other side. Anyone else?
I'd love to pick up on that, how to get more people on this side, and of course, it's not
Yes or wrong. Yeah,
two-dimensional,
yeah.
but I wanted to continue there, because that's something that gives me hope day to day, is to see and to represent these brilliant youth that are just bursting with energy, with competence, and with enthusiasm and courage, and coupling them with scientists that are sort of have thought about this, are frustrated, but also have magnificent ways of explaining these things, and to couple that again with interest from finance, and also, at least in Norway, a growing sense of urgency in media, which is no small thing, because this is a very petrol-dependent country, which is duped in petrol commercials every day. So, but it's turning a little bit in the social legitimacy of exposing younger generations to these plights without any consideration, and the dangers of these continue business as usual. And what really gives me hope is how you see that cross-fertilization of jurisprudence across jurisdiction, and it feels at times as a race to the top. Because yes, you will have outliers with judgments that are not science-based, or that are very much doesn't understand what's at stake. But then that jurisprudential dialogue is informed by very much scientific-based judgments, such as the Itlas opinion, such as the Strasbourg court judgment. And they are raising the bar so that it doesn't really matter that you have some cases that doesn't go well, because they doesn't hold up argumentatively, because you're not grounded sufficiently in an understanding of the urgency that is objectively there. So I think that's something that gives me hope. It's just, you see that the more this is sort of, the more accessible this information is, the more people come on board.
Okay. So I will say that what gives me hope in this is seeing the hope that we bring to a lot of lesser developed economies. There is a particular country that we worked with, and the day that we helped them solarize one of their health centers, and the nurses there discussed how they had carried out cesarean operations for women giving birth with torchlights from their mobile phones, and the number of deaths that they had recorded because of no energy, there was no energy security. It was, to me, a light bulb moment on what is the disparity between the developed country. And when we're talking about maternal mortality and talking about infant mortality, it's not just about diseases. It also comes from lack of vaccines, lack of energy, and some of the ways that we can support these countries is in helping them access clean and affordable energy. So hearing from these people and seeing a lot of the improvements that have been done in the healthcare centers from these, it kind of gives me hope that the work that we're doing with energy equity isn't just for the sake of being, doing some work, that it's actually making impactful meaning for a lot of the societies that need it out there. So for me, that gives me hope and keeps me moving. Yeah.
Next time I'll steal the floor first, because otherwise I feel like I'm a copycat. Saying what everybody's saying. Yeah. No, fully agree with Jenny. Again, you have to remember we're not that old, but we kind of a bit veterans in this room. So I feel like the growth in activism around me is feels cozier because I'm not alone. But so I get hope in seeing extremely sophisticated, smart young activists taking up cases that I support and help make, and seeing them with successful lawyers in charge. It's extremely gives me a lot of hope that this army of climate conscious professionals is growing. Again, we have to not just sit and just enjoy each other's company, but do it with a purpose. And I'm hopeful that we will make a dent, but we have to be all hands on deck. There's no time to spare. But otherwise, sharing everybody's hope, and with a bit of warning, cautious optimism. We're trying to nail it that way.
I think it's probably a good time to take some questions for the panel, so we'll open it up at this point.
Just a quick note, there's a microphone going around, and we do ask that you wait for the microphone and use that for the questions.
Hello, this is Gönen Şükürkaynak, LLM 2001, same class as Maxime. So I got into the climate fight quite late in the process, and Maxime has been influential in that actually. I have functioned as a Board of Trustees member of Client Earth for a very long time globally. And one thing I found was that, as Jenny said, information becoming accessible makes it quite inviting. But also, there are a lot of people out there that do not live up to the expectations of a climate fighter in their lives, yet they have good litigation abilities and they have their hearts in the right place to do things. This is an ongoing thing between me and Maxime as well, because Maxime is on the pedestal and she lives life the way it should be lived in terms of climate. Whereas I do eat the big steak and I constantly fly.
I didn't row across the Atlantic.
I mean, so, I do eat the big steak every once in a while, and I do fly everywhere, and my life is not an exemplary life of someone who would do climate change work. Yet, as I went into litigating more and more of these things, and especially hunting the standing matter, I found that a lot of young people, they feel first they should get their act together, and then they will deserve to move into the climate litigation field. Would you agree with it? Is there a way of dealing with this problem? Don't you think making it accessible in terms of, you're a good person, just come on and do your thing. You don't have to, be one of us, kind of a thing. Don't you think it may also help? I know that we're close to the tipping point, and I know that it is important for people to be consistent in what they argue and what they do, but at the same time, I feel like we're losing a lot of valuable resources and people who could make a change. So, question to whoever wants to take it on.
Oh, maybe this time I'm going
You're
Thank
first, so you're next.
this time. No, listen, again, I want to build an army. Everyone's welcome, all hands on deck. I don't have any preconceptions about who can be, who can't be on board. All I know also is something. We weren't asked about what we find difficult. We are hopeful, but we are also, what I worry about, as you know, is speed. And the last 3 days I was in New York, and at the Climate Week, and a lot of my interactions are trying to fundraise money to fund this climate litigation and this policy work as an NGO. And I'm having the same theme with those funders. Speed at funding, put your money into play, everybody gets on board. So we've done 125 grants in our climate litigation program, and that's the mantra: put the money into play with trusted grantees, and they know their field, allow them to re-grant. But the bottom line is the overarching theme for me is speed. Yes, sometimes you make mistakes, but it's still better than just keeping still. Get going.
Thank you, and it's a great question, and I fully agree with you, Maxime, here. I had the same question for my professor, Jodie Freeman, before I left, because I was trying to figure out how to be effective, where to go, and she sort of set up a number of things I could do, go into the industry, go into politics, go into academia, but what she did say is, you will be tempted to sort of live very purely, but you can't necessarily be effective if your preoccupation is by living so purely. So if you want to be effective, let that be sort of the guiding thing. But of course, personally, I do find it easier if I'm aligned a little bit with what I preach, but I don't think that is needed of everyone. That's how I work. But I fly. I came here. I didn't row. So I think you can't, if you are to sort of, you can't ask the impossible of. You have to, if there's something to be done, you have to allow yourself the tools to do it. Yeah.
Let me add something. 2 things. First, a warning. I've encountered a lot of what I call environmental mercenaries. And it's very easy to mistake them for young activists. They want to have presence, and they're able to move money for the wrong reasons. And my take with that is the other aspect of how do you take that force and flip it? In what sense? Invite them to understand the issues from all angles. Because the first thing is run away from them. Embracing the bear concept. Like, okay, come on, let me take you to what is a substandard or illegal recycling facility, and let me take you to one which is done properly. And then the consequences of all that's been done illegally or not properly, and how do you change that? Because what I found, for example, with the pottery thing, is that the easiest way out was ban pottery. And what about all the families and the indigenous groups that's their livelihood? So from one stroke, you could be wiping people out. And so how do you find creative ways? And the frustration there, sometimes it's the longer road and not the fastest, but it's the right road in the sense that you're protecting a group, like in the case of potterers, but also you're educating people to understand the problems from the different aspects. Because I understand the urgency, the tipping point, and all those kind of things, but I mean, I'm from an industrial city. So it wouldn't be a successful city and attracting so much international investment and with all the nearshoring and all those kind of things without industry and jobs and universities and all that if you're not having places to work. The thing is, how do you change those places and the way and the ethics of industry and associations to improve things? And so I would say for young people who want to be there to get better informed and to raise the bar on ethics, because the mercenaries are out there.
Any other questions? We'll get you next.
Thank you. My name is Gabriela Greensteins. I did my LLM in 2012, and I like the question about what makes you hopeful. So I'm going to take a twist on that one. So what is one action you think it's doable to combat climate change, and that you would focus, your area's expertise into doing that next?
Cut methane. Cut methane can avoid cutting the short-lived climate pollutants, non-CO2, can avoid 3 to 5 more warming than CO2 can do alone by 2050. So let's just try to be efficient if we need to prioritize, and it's difficult to transition away of a lot of practices and economy. So the single fastest, cheapest piece is to reduce methane emissions. So it's not, the low-hanging fruit is the fossil methane because the technologies are available, affordable, scalable. And most of the time they are 75% of the time they're no cost for the fossil fuel industry to put them into place. So easy, right? Ish. Waste, also technologies available. Agriculture, difficult politically, but not impossible. Just takes a lot more sophistication to address it. So for me, cut methane. There's a piece in, you can search on the internet, there's an article from someone said, cut methane or die. That's where we are, because we need, and it's a death sentence for some country between 1.5 and 2. We're sitting there. I'm not going to be in my daily life, apart from a couple of heat waves or maybe a bit of rain in London, but on the front line, it's a different story. So I think we have to be efficient, and that's my piece for now.
Just mandatory and ethical recycling.
We'll give time for one more question. Up here, I think. Yeah.
You have spoken with about your daughter, and what else can we do with children? You spoke about youth, And I went through your experiment. In other words, I was working for a heavy chemical company. I was working with Solvay. I was senior vice president, and one day my 10-year-old said, "Oh, you don't walk the talk." And I said, "Okay, fine, let's resign." And I created a tiny NGO, which is now in France, because, well, can you hear from my accent, I'm French. And at least you got rid of your accent, it's good.
I married a Brit, so that's the key.
Then you get the big, big
no
excuse. And my tiny NGO is called Albatross, and we train about 15,000 kids in China, France, and Brazil. And we are using like very simple, innovative tools. And therefore, what do you do? What do you envision for children to train them, basically, on climate ethics in a way which could be instrumental in the future? Because, well, I do believe that education at the youngest age can be where we should start from, even before fundraising. Because no, I mean, I know fundraising is always like a headache for whatever we do, and this world is driven by money. I mean, let's face it. But on the other hand, when we go down to ethics, sometimes there is a contradiction. I mean, this is just my tiny view.
Well, it looks like you have more experience than me then in educating. So, I mean, I have.
No, I
fully-
just have four
Yeah,
children.
no. But I
just have
think
four
I
children.
would like to hear what you do and replicate that further and
Oh,
expand
no,
because.
we have adopted 4 kids
Yeah.
when we are living in Asia with my husband, which was like a crazy things to do, and and then they taught me. Because I was like you, I was like into corporate finance, and then after that I turned into chemical, and this was not good for my kids. And basically, I took the lesson from my tiny from my kitchen, I would say, because my kids were like that. I mean, they were like criticizing me.
I think that's quite central. I mean, in some countries like mine, climate change can be a divisive issue, but if we really drill down, it's all about what we leave for the youngest and those who will come after. And I think that's a fundamentally unifying issue. That's something that we all have an interest in, is preserving conditions for life, right? Exactly. And that is, so I think it's like, one shouldn't place that responsibility, of course, on underage and youth. Everyone who's adult must step up. But I at least draw, whenever I need energy, I think of all of those who would have thought the same in the years to come. And then that makes any resistance seem quite pale in comparison.
I think we're out of time. I want to thank our incredibly wonderful panel.